Code A is back, guys. It's been just an hour and a half or so since our last Code A group.
Yep.
And we're going into our second one now. Fantasy is playing. He's coming out of hiding. And we're going to find out today if he's going to see his shadow or if we're going to have 6 more weeks of Code A.
We have Fantasy going up against the Terran player in the first group today. Fantasy versus Bbyong, actually. And the other 2 players are Zerg and a Protoss. So we could actually see a group where no Terran player advances once again. It is possible. But
I feel like with the curse that's starting to emerge, like there could be a situation where like there's 3 Terran players and one of them just doesn't show up, and then there's still no Terran player going to Code S.
Yeah, it could be a very bad season for Terran fans in Code S, to be
Maru like switches regions to WCS EU, and there's just like 0 Terran players in Code S.
Maru is the only one right now, and so far we had, let me just count real quick, 5 groups, and from all those, so 10 players advanced to Code S, and not a single one of those is Terran. We still have a couple of Terran players participating, of course, not only this week, but also next week, so there is a chance that Terran certainly, like they have reborn like the phoenix from the ashes and are going all the way to Code S, and suddenly it's stacked. But right now it looks like there are not going to be too many Terran players in Code S this season. Yep. But maybe Fantasy and Bbyong, they might be the 2 that are able to advance at least this week. They're going to face each other in the first round, or in the first match of today. And we are also having a quick look at the results that we had earlier in today's group, so let's take a look at that. Back then we had Roro advance together with Panic.
Panic was able to take that 2-0 win over Cure there at the end.
Yep, didn't Panic in the games?
No, did not, and I actually played some really solid Protoss versus Terran today. And Roro, on the other hand, only one weird game out of him in game 1 between him and Panic, but otherwise looked really solid in his match against Cure as well. And of course, our matches for tonight.
As mentioned before, Fantasy versus Bbyong is the first game, and Super versus Solar is going to be our second. And it's, for me, super interesting that we actually have Bbyong and Super in the same group here, because they were also in the same bracket at the Code A qualifier. So they are going to face each other in just another best of 3.
Yep, this is going to be pretty awesome. I think that if Solar weren't in the group, then you could say there's a high chance we get 2 Terrans out of this group, but Super's the dark horse. Solar has to prove himself in the individual league here. He's been doing really well in Pro League, also online tournaments. And Fantasy, I mean, he hasn't really played very many televised matches recently and doesn't really play in online tournaments as far as I know. So I think that this is kind of like the proving ground for him for what he's been working on with the SKT in that team house.
I really want to see how exactly he's going to do today. And to be honest, at the qualifier, I was really impressed by how Bbyong played. At the beginning, I was not really sure about him, because at that qualifier, for me, at the qualifier is always the decision which players do I take the APM videos of. And I was lucky enough to get one from Bbyong and Super when they were playing their match. But at first, I was trying to make the decision in favor of the Protoss player, because I'm like, yeah, Bbyong. I was always a little bit on the fence about it, but then I watched his matches and I actually filmed that, and I'm like, oh my god, like he is really, really doing so well there.
He's a really, really good Terran player. For me, like for all the Castle players who switched over to StarCraft II, he was like the best Terran for a while. And Innovation passed him for sure, but like for a while I was looking at him and going, I think he's going to be the one.
The thing with Bbyong is, like, when he came over, he started really well, and then he completely fell off.
Yeah, he just disappeared. Like,
he was super disappointing after, like, let's say 3 months after he made the transition out of the Swarm for quite some time. But now he came back, and that just stuck with me a little bit, that he fell off there back then. So I'm always a little bit, yeah, let's see how he's going to do, because for me it's always a bit of a shape thing, but he really impressed me at the qualifier. He had great games there. So I'm expecting a lot from him today, and I would not be surprised to see him coming out of this group as the first player.
Yeah, he could actually be the first place player in this group. Depends on how in shape Fantasy is, because he and Bbyong are going head-to-head here in our very first game, in our Terran versus Terran, a rare matchup these days in Korea. Do see it every now and then. Frost is the first map, so 4-player map, relatively large. And only time will tell what sort of strategies we're going to see from these 2. Bbyong looking very tense here, and Fantasy looking a little bit tired.
Doesn't he always?
He does.
Fantasy is the guy that the last time that he actually qualified for Code A, I couldn't believe it. Like, do you remember this massive, this super intense match that he played like 40 minutes, and it was like, we both were like, oh my god, this game is just crazy, and then he wins it. He's finally qualified. He qualified for KS, actually, and he doesn't even smile. Like, he just stands up, packs his stuff, leaves, and I'm like, what, dude, come on, like, you were fighting for the entire time, now you're in KS, and you don't even crack a smile? Well, maybe we'll see one today. He's going up against Bbyong here, the GSL Code A, brought to you by Solid Wolf.
Fantasy versus Bbyong.
Starting to the top left, we have Fantasy. Our Terran player in red disappeared for some time. Now he's back to business, but the last Terran versus Terran that he played is more than half a year ago. Let's see what he can bring to the table going up against a fellow Terran player. Because starting now on the map here, our first map in the best of 3 series. Frost at the bottom left. We have Bbyong, CJ's player here. Decent track record against Terran. Just recently defeated 2 in the Code A qualifier. Was able to defeat Natural and Journey.
Yep, this is a good way for him to prove himself outside of Pro League, where his team has been having quite some trouble, actually. A lot of people really disappointed with CJ's results so far. And everyone's been wondering why Fantasy hasn't come out for SKT, myself included. SKT, I guess, didn't really need him with how well they've been doing, but this is kind of like his moment to show himself. He's been actually playing, so far this game, every time I look at his APM, he's like below 50. It's like he's just only doing the necessary actions he needs to make his structures and just sitting back.
Pulling an Elfie here.
Yeah, a little bit.
And, well, for Bbyong right now, we have Bbyong with the more aggressive gas. He takes the gas before heading into the barracks, whereas on the other hand, Fantasy started the barracks first, but added his refinery nonetheless. So Bbyong a little bit ahead in the mining of gas. And as it turns out, Fantasy with the correct scout goes to the bottom left first with this SCV and will find Bbyong's space immediately, and then, of course, see really quickly that the gas was taking a little bit faster.
Yep. And Fantasy's Reaper Scout is also going to be a great way for him to come in there and verify after that what he's seeing. So there's the factory going down. The SV will come in here and see this. And he wants to know, do you take the second gas? And you know, how much are you going to commit to the aggression, or are you going to expand? That's what the Reaper's going to come in there and see. Bbyong, on the other hand, is playing totally blind. Actually, I take it back. I didn't see they sent that out. He is going to come up here and see. So the opposite of what I said, he's playing safe, and he will actually lose that SCV right away to the Reaper. What he can do about it.
Q tries to attack the Reaper for a second. That, of course, doesn't help it. Nope. And the Reaper will also be back at full hit points, not like it's a Marine. It's probably more reflex that he had there.
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe just a little bit of frustration. Double Reaper, actually, for Fantasy. This is something we've seen in TVT quite a bit, because if you want to send your Hellions out to attack when you have that factory up early, then you're not going to have them at home to defend the Reaper, so you have to be careful about the Reapers coming in there. And I mean, in TVT, the only thing that can defend Reapers is Marines. If your Marines aren't in the right spot, that Reaper starts picking away at your hit points and then runs away and regens. The second Reaper shows up, things can get nasty.
Yeah, I might try to kill the SCV that is currently building the starport, but it doesn't do it. There's one Marine already, and we have the second, of course, also in position. But now that there's a double Reaper, he has maybe a chance to pick something off here. But more and more Marines, of course, joining the battle, as well as Hellions. Looks more and more like we're going to see just a medevac being produced in that starport. There's no second gas taken.
Yeah, and this is something that Fantasy is able to find out with his Reaper Scout. On the other hand, he takes his own second gas at home behind his command center, and we'll be able to tech up very quickly behind his Reaper expand. Even has a reactor here to drop possibly on his factory, depending on what sort of style he wants to show us. And his two Reapers are, at this point, not really able to do anything, but with the two Reapers, he can stop the Hellions from moving out, which means that his own command center at home can go up securely without worrying about the SV getting picked off, and that bunker that he's making at the front, of course, will secure this long-term as well.
Yeah, and Bbyong, he needs to do some damage now. This is the trade-off that you go for if you really just rush out your tech and then you delay your expansion a little bit. This is exactly what we're seeing right here, even the Widow Miner being built. The thing is that Bbyong needs to do something, and Fantasy, of course, has now also a choice to make. Does he really send those SCVs over to the mineral line at the natural immediately, or does he keep them close at home so that he only has to defend a single mineral line? Already patrolling here with the Hellions and the Reapers, trying to find out where exactly that one medevac is, and there it is, dropping immediately. The Hellions from the low ground lending their strength to that attack.
Excellent control here by Fantasy. He knows that those two Reapers that he have, even though they're not really combat units, are going to be integral in his defense here. So he pulls them back, saves them right away, even starts repairing his Hellions, but he needs to swing around the right side and pick off these Marines. Really nice splitting on the other hand by Bbyong, making sure that he doesn't get too much splash damage done. And a very solid defense here so far by Fantasy.
Yeah, really well done. And Bbyong is behind not only in building his own command center, but also in the harvest account a little bit. He's trying to do some damage with that medevac, but he can't really do too much here. He's adding another command center immediately, taking a bit of a risk because he knows that he has to catch up somehow.
Yeah, this is a great choice by him. Also knowing that with what Fantasy has, he's not going to be able to punish him for taking a fast third. Does save this medevac. And it looks like Fantasy is going into mech. He hasn't made any Marines in a long time. He's just been using the barracks to make add-ons. Will follow up with, it looks like, a Raven to be safe. And no, changes his mind here. We'll start some Marines there. At least not changing his mind, but showing the truth. Changing my mind. And
he's building the Raven.
Yeah, he makes the Raven, but I think he just put his barracks to make more Marines.
Ah, you mean mech? Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, okay, I completely
He's meching. I thought he was meching, but he's
I
not.
completely misunderstood you there. I was like, no, he's building the Raven. You were right. Like,
Yeah, third CC will be started.
yeah, I thought you mixed up the production tabs. But yeah, we have the Raven for Fantasy and also the third CC for him. The one for Bbyong is nearly completed. His orbital tech just now finishing at the natural. So he's really falling a little bit behind in this regard. You can see that the discrepancy in the harvest account, 37 against 28. So quite the difference here.
Ooh, how much damage is Fantasy going to be getting done with these Hellions is a big question here. He has the Reapers coming over as well to be annoying.
There's a siege tank on the other hand for Bbyong already. If that is in siege mode, and it is, he shouldn't be able to do too much here.
He has to still be careful. Fantasy back at home with that drop that goes into his main base, sneaking right behind that mineral line. Reaper comes in here, meanwhile, to get a little bit more information. But he's got to pull his SCVs away here. He's losing a lot, and he doesn't want to stack them up in a line. He takes so much damage. Yeah,
he takes quite a bit of damage and loses 6 total immediately. Another one goes down. And of course, he's also losing the mining time back at... Oh my god, he sends them in!
Oh, wow. That could have even been better if the Hellions targeted perfectly. But still, I mean, 34 to 24, his third orbital's up faster now. He's evened out the gap in tech, and things are looking really good for Bbyong now. He takes the lead.
He killed 19 harvesters in total, and before that, both of them just killed the scouting SCV, and that was it. So, really well done by Bbyong, and a little bit shaky by Fantasy.
Yeah, I think he got a little bit more concerned about his, you know, he focused too much on this Hellion run by, which now is not going to accomplish anything because a second siege tank is out, the bunker is filled. And he can't actually attack this directly. I mean, he could try to go for it, but it's not going to be worth it. He eats way too much siege tank fire here.
Yeah, loses Hellions too, and currently we have a 10 supply harvester lead for Bbyong over Fantasy and also the faster third CC.
And it looks like we're actually going to see 2 additional factories queued up right now for Bbyong. So even though he started making a lot of Marines and he had a heavy Marine count early on to defend his third base, he is going to go into that later mech. Whereas Fantasy is definitely not, because he starts STEM and additional barracks production. So we're going to have to clash these 2 compositions here.
Now we already have the Armory is now being started so that he can also get into his upgrades on his own. Now on the other hand, we have another starport coming into play, and of course also the Scanium in Fantasy. So he identifies real quickly what's going on in his opponent's base.
Yeah, he knows, okay, you're going for Bio, Marine tank, to be specific. And it's really important for him to scan this, because with all the Hellions that Fantasy made early on, Bbyong might think, okay, it's still quite likely that you're going mech with all these Hellions that you're using to pressure me. You spend a lot of resources on that, so he wants to make sure 100%. So that's a really good scan, because if he works under false pretenses, then that can really hurt how the composition that he's trying to build.
We have that third now already moving over to the mineral line. The Hellions are in position to scout this.
Ooh, and
at least they should, but there's a siege tank on the high ground, and that shields the third base quite a bit.
The Hellions could come back later and roast some SCVs from the high ground instead of you know, getting to that siege tank like you said. Another scan here by Fantasy, and he's going to identify, okay, mech is your choice.
That scan did not see the siege tank, by the way, so he might think that he's safe just moving in, and then he will lose a few of his Hellions. The question is, how many of the SCVs is he going to kill before that happens?
Well, he's still really having this idea of hanging out on the cliff, which I do like. But that could have happened, like you said. He didn't see the siege tank there, which is a really well-placed siege tank. It's just not useful against the high ground here. Here we go. Gets a mule. And this spotting depot does not help. It's a bit too late.
Yeah, that would, well, we have the rest of the army already moving over, and that will shut those Hellions out for now. But in terms of overall supply, Fantasy once again taking a little bit of a lead here, but we also have upgrades started for Bbyong.
You know, I was just going to say, I think that Bbyong could even make a bunker on the high ground there, behind his base, put 4 Marines in there. It's not a huge investment, and that means no more Hellions or Hellbat Harass is going to really bother him over there.
He's not going to upgrade his Marines anyway, so might as well. And once again, the Hellions moving in, doing some damage, but this time it looks like they might be trapped. Yeah, 1 Hellion goes down, 2, 3.
I mean, he has so many Marines already on the map, even though he's not going to be using those. Might as well put them in a bunker to shut down Hellion Harass.
Yeah, Hellbat's now being produced, siege tanks, Blue Flame, +1 attack, also are queued up. We have a lot more tanks for him now joining the battle, 140 supply against 130 overall. And for Fantasy, the third base is also in position, so both of them are currently with a very similar income.
Yeah, and Fantasy's base is uncontested. He's not harassed in any way. He even has, it looks like, a depot wall set up at the Bridge of Doom.
Yep.
So no Hellions are going to go by that way without him seeing it. He's actually going to lose a few Hellions, Bbyong that is, to this Bioforce. Gets a few Marines as the trade.
Fantasy builds 2 additional starports here.
I think he's going to go straight for that air control.
Yeah, looks really very much like it.
if you can get air control early on and kind of roll with that, once you get a 4th base up or you have enough gas bank, you can switch into battle cruisers. You can also really control your opponent's Ravens a lot, because if you can eliminate your opponent's Ravens, it means their Marauders are much stronger. Ravens are so key for point defense drone.
The big advantage that Bbyong is going to have is that he will have the upgrades.
Yes.
He's an advantage in terms of his air and mech upgrades. Space.
Yeah, and Hellbat's here ready to boost on top of these Marines. It's a very Marine-heavy composition still here for Fantasy, and Hellbats are going to have such a fun time with that, especially with the Blue Flame upgrade.
Yeah,
and
there we
+1.
have the Vikings being built, though. He's moving up to get one tech lab here, actually. Actually, is he getting 1 or 2?
Looks like he's making a second one now.
Yeah, it looks like he makes the second one, so we could see him going into additional Banshees now.
Yeah, Banshees,
Banshees,
Ravens, both, whichever he prefers at this time. I think adding Ravens first, probably the choice.
Yeah.
And this Hellbat squad in the medevacs is oh so scary right now for Fantasy's Marine count. I mean, he does not want to lose those. Here we go, Hellions on the right side. Hellbat's considering for the drop. He does boost in on top, decides not to go for it. He sees those siege tanks there, knows it's not the right choice. And it is Banshees first, in fact, that we see for Fantasy, but he doesn't have the Viking count to support that right now.
Yeah, he wants to go up against those siege tanks, but the Vikings are definitely going to be a big issue here, especially since they already started sniping with the medevacs, taking down 2 of them. Here comes the drop of the Hellbats on top of the tanks. Bbyong is going for it. He has a massive lead in army supply. Now the battle of the Vikings. Point defense drones being dropped by both players. We have that upgrade advantage that I was talking about earlier for Bbyong, and he is making it work.
Yep, he's really trading quite efficiently here. Loses a lot of his Vikings on the other hand, which is great for Fantasy. The point defense helping out just ever so slightly there in that fight. He's pushing the rest of his siege tank down on the low ground, and Fantasy kiting back here, but the small army he has is just not quite enough.
There was no point defense run anymore for Bbyong, and Fantasy just moved back into the range of his own point defense run. It helped so much. He won the air battle, but he's losing everything on the ground right now.
Yep. The air battle is really important for these Banshees, though, which slowly but steadily will hold this off. And he's actually trying to go for a flank here. If these tanks unsiege and move back, he can stim, run in, and hit those unsieged tanks with his Bioforce. It's just so small here.
He's building missile turrets right here at the front to make sure that that Banshee is not getting too many kills. Needs to retreat now, and of course the first thing that Bbyong does after that is building additional Vikings and also adding a few Thors into the mix. But a nice flank here by Fantasy, trying to now make use of his better mobility and moving down to the bottom left right away. And the one thing that Bbyong has to do is get a few siege tanks in there so that he can siege up on the high ground. The problem is he's building Thors.
Yep, he's cut off reinforcements, he's going for the counterattack here. He will be able to get these depots at the very least. Tries to find an opening here as well, but there's too many siege tanks. And he can force a lift on this command center, it looks like, but he's got to be careful. He's going to get this bio army trapped.
He can kill it. He's going to kill the CC. It's not being repaired.
And SCV's off the line here. Here come the Hellbats. He's trying to roast these Marines, but they've already done a ton of damage.
Yeah, they already killed the command center and cut Bbyong off from the income of this one base. But now, of course, in overall supply, and especially in the army supply, Bbyong has a bit of a lead. He's lacking a few units here at the top, on the other hand, and if Fantasy now goes in from 2 different angles, he might be just able to clean out all the tanks, because the rest of the army is just not there yet. It's moving in, but Bbyong is...
Fantasy keeps scanning, you know, he's trying to decide, does he have enough?
There we go.
He goes in here to catch some of these reinforcements.
Oh god, that was a bad timing here for Fantasy. He didn't know that the rest of the army was just moving in from the south, and then he's stuck between 2 places.
Yeah, the Banshee does die to the missile turret as well, and now Byung's reinforced army is much stronger. 94 to 75. He's pushing his way up the ramp. Hellbats to tank, SCVs to repair, even Thors at the back to help against the Banshees.
That army is so strong, and he takes down the siege tanks immediately. The Banshee is gone already. The Thor is doing a lot of damage, and Fantasy, he drops down in supply. Another siege tank goes down. Fantasy is losing everything here right now.
Yep, he's just trying to hold on because he knows he has the faster reinforcements, he has the more cost-efficient units, and he can reproduce a lot faster, but his ramp is sieged. There's way too much repair here, and he's going to lose all of these SPs. The Hellbats at the front making such a big difference here, and I think that is going to be game, ladies and gentlemen.
Clumping up SCVs against Blue Flame Hellbats is never a good idea, and suddenly Fantasy is down to 74 to 80 supply against 123. That command center is going down, the Thors taking it apart. And now we have more and more units streaming across the map for Bbyong.
That's it. He's contained on 2 base. The 3rd base for Bbyong has been remade.
He could actually just send a few units, maybe the Blue Flame Helmets, over to the 3rd base, the 3rd base, and take down the SCVs there.
just camping the ramp, which means no units are ever getting out of here. He starts a missile turret in his opponent's base to stop any drops. The Thor's tank, the siege tank's getting even up onto the production facilities. Picks off a siege tank there with his Thor and walks back. Now he's got the siege tanks for support, and this is just a disaster. It's getting bad to worse here for Fantasy.
Way too much damage. Fantasy has no chance here. 25 army supply left in the GG. As Bbyong takes game number 1 in the series.
Pretty back and forth series, not or game I should say. Game number 1 is pretty back and forth. Fantasy having some advantages early on. The real turning point I feel was when the SCVs were killed by those Hellions in the main base. Fantasy didn't react very quickly, and then he stacked up the SCVs. He lost a lot, and then he was suddenly against a Terran opponent who was building a mech composition who had 3 bases that he couldn't really pressure. 3 base faster than Fantasy had 3 base.
Yeah, that drop where he killed, I think, 19 in total, or 18.
It was an insane amount.
That was pretty crazy, and that was definitely the point where Fantasy lost, or not only lost the game, but lost the advantage that he had before, and Bbyong got ahead because of the faster command center and everything else that he already controlled. So nice game by Bbyong and a good decision making later on in the match. Now we have the map choice for Fantasy. It's Polar Knight.
Polar Knight is the map choice here. An interesting choice. Polar Knight has that base, the natural, where you can siege up from behind. We've seen that a lot in TVT, if somebody gets an advantage and they siege up tanks behind your natural, you have to kind of lift or pull your SCVs away if they have Viking control. Something we may see here. Fantasy going bio in game number 1. Would like to see him switch it up and go mech here again. I feel like Bbyong probably will stick with the same composition.
Bbyong did really well with that, but it depends, I guess, a lot what he's going to scout here. Either way, he's going to be happy that he took the lead in the so important first map. Going into map number 2, Polar Knight between Fantasy and Bbyong at the GSL Code S.